Howdy folks, artist and writer Shel Presto DiBaggio here. I'm hanging out with writer Magnificent Mike DiBaggio, who is also my husband, and Kickin' Kim Holm, a fellow artist. We're going to talk about our decisions to release our work into the Creative Commons, what licenses we use, and what the benefits and drawbacks of the particular licenses that we use are. Warning, we're not lawyers, but we are creators who care deeply about our creations. But before we get into it, I wanted to let you know that Mike and I are currently running a Kickstarter for an RPG zine chock full of ideas for you to throw at player characters in your current campaign. Do you need more supernatural foes, gruesome all-new spells, and tainted psychic horrors for your RPG campaign? Then please check out Dauntless, the heroic adventure zine on Kickstarter. Issue 1 features Kim's art as well as mine.
But still, there are all these things that are almost impossible to navigate without breaking copyright law. Like, when are you allowed to spread a link on the internet? Which is interesting because there have been cases that have shown that you're not actually allowed to spread links. For instance, if it's a link from a news site that copies the story from another news site, then you're spreading their copyright breach.
Right.
If the link is presenting this much text in the link header, then that may be a copyright breach. And it's not like it's not like many people actually follow these laws, but it's sort of a good illustration of how absurd and complicated these laws that don't work are.
Right.
If you're actually breaking the law by posting a link on Facebook, what? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you always hear people, oh, what about these imaginary small time artists that are supposedly being held by copyright, which mostly don't exist. But yeah, if you put them in the boat where now you're being sued because you posted a link, or that's a worldview shifting event. I'm sorry, Shel, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and they're not trying to make these laws more freeing for the populace. They're trying to tighten them even more. Look at what was going on with.
Sorry, I just want to add, they're also not trying to make them simpler to understand. They're trying to make it more complicated to understand so that you never know what's legal and what's not.
But there was that whole kerfluffle with Europe and YouTube. Where I don't even remember what the exact issue was, but it was over music or posting clips or reviews or something like that. They're trying to make...
I can explain a bit about that. It's not the case that I know the most about, but the case is that the music industry and television industry and a few other industries lobbied for a law that would require everything that is uploaded to the internet to be pre-screened by these sort of copyright filters. So right now on YouTube, you have these copyright filters, which we all know don't really work all that well.
Right.
And definitely don't understand fair use, but they happen after the fact. You have uploaded it, and then the filter tries to screen for it. The new European laws require that this filtering happen before you upload it, which is a kind of a huge difference. And this is the reason why countless of organizations, especially organizations dealing with freedom of speech, dealing with human rights, dealing with freedom of the press, wrote all these open letters about we have to stop this.
Mm.
And we didn't stop it thus far. And when the law got passed, I had several friends on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook who are in the publishing industry and in the music industry celebrating this is a grand day for our industry. Now we are protected. And I tried asking them, linking to one of the open letters from organizations dealing with freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and human rights, saying that this is a very bad idea. How can you defend it? And I got no reply from several people who I respect deeply for their creative work and contributions to culture. Nothing, because artists generally don't want to think too deeply about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, I've said a lot of times that artists don't like to think about this issue. One of the things I do is that I work with a lot of young bands. And whenever I explain what I'm doing with the copyright and free work, and I try to negotiate so that if I work for a band, I get the rights back, and then I can release it for free use at a later date. And whenever I work with young bands, they're all like, "Yeah, rock on, pirates, go!" so it seems that the younger generation actually, I wouldn't accuse all of them of thinking too deeply about it, but they do. They realize the scam in some way, and that's very good to see.
Yeah, I have to say that we have contracted. We have, of course, a lot of artist and writer friends, and we've had them do like artwork for our books, and the condition is always everything we produce for the Ascension Epoch is CC by SA, and that includes, as I always like to tell them, that means you can go ahead and we want you to make prints and sell your stuff at cons or sell your stuff on your website and so forth. But generally, I won't even say the majority of those people that we reach out to are very supportive of that, and they're very on board with that. And yet, unfortunately, I try and talk more of them into actually releasing their own creative stuff in the Creative Commons. But I don't think I've had much success with that. But it's great to hear that the younger music making audience is very open to that.
If I can just highlight a difference between the licenses we are using, because I'm very happy that we haven't talked much about Creative Commons, because Creative Commons is what we need is a bridge over troubled waters, and Creative Commons is an old rowboat, which sort of
yes.
It's good that we have it, but it doesn't actually do the job we need.
Right.
You're using the share alike license, and I'm using most of the time. I'm using the attribution license, and as I understand it, the attribution license is actually the most open license you're legally allowed to use under European copyright law.
It is, in fact.
Because we have the moral rights, which I support fully, which is the right to citation and the right to protect your good name and reputation. And I think that's, I want to be cited as the creator of anything I do. And if some, for instance, if a Nazi organization wants to use my work, then I want to say that, no, you can't put my name on your thing. I have to protect my good name and reputation. I'm all for those rights, and those are the rights that are always protected by the European copyright laws, by the Berne Convention, and those are the rights which still remain in the Creative Commons Attribution license. Now, I thought about this quite a lot before I decided to go with the attribution license. I was very tempted to go with a share-alike license because I thought, as you are thinking, that everyone can use my stuff, but they have to share it in the same way. And that's a good thought. That's a noble thought. But from my perspective, whenever someone is sharing my work, this is it's an ongoing communication between me and the one who is sharing it. And in a lot of cases, I know that if a young band is going to use my album work, they can't bloody well say that it's a share-alike work and go with that to their publishing company, to their record company. So it's more important for me to have them use my work, maybe once, maybe twice, and then start thinking about this until they are ready to do something themselves. And that requires that, when I release my own stuff online for free use, that means that you can download it, put your silly band logo on it, and then copyright that as your album cover. That's okay for me. You can make a copyrighted work out of my stuff. And I'm not very fond of copyrighted works, but the fact that more and more people are using my free and open works is, even if they're copyrighting their album art or their book or their whatever, that's okay because it's the start of a communication, and it's a conversation between artists. I don't want to have this conversation with big companies. They're not interested in using Creative Commons
exactly.
work. Yep. That's not in their interest. But with artists, if you make a great artistic work, I respect that so much. No matter if I hate everything else about you, if you manage to make something good and put something good into the world, you have all my respect. And that's a basis this is a basis from where you can start a conversation. And perhaps that conversation will lead to one of these young bands I'm working with right now. Maybe in 5 years they will do something that is free and open. Maybe in 10 years they will. Maybe they will abandon music and then go into some other field and then understand the importance of free work. But the important thing for me is to start the conversation.
It's interesting that you look at it that way, because when Shell and I first talked about releasing our stuff under attribution share alike. We had some arguments about it, and I was pushing for it. Shell wasn't quite sure about it. I mean, she does agree now. But one of the things that we thought, we were like, oh well, people will really love this. Was our thought, and because hey, it can be theirs too, and they can create new stuff, and then we can use their stuff, and other people do it, and people like to write fan fiction, right? So this will be even better. This is the next level of being able to take something and make it your own.
And then reality disappointed you.
Yes, exactly. What we found is that almost no one cares. And
the interesting thing is the people that do care, like with boards, we actually got tossed off of a open source superheroes board because we're share alike.
It was a wiki, yeah. The open or the public domain superheroes wiki. Which is kind of a silly site, but they have they have an open source section, and I put up many of our characters there, and one of the editors got a bug up his butt and went through and basically was waging this ideological war against anything Creative Commons or anything other than this very weird.
All rights reversed.
Yeah. They actually wanted anything to say this weird, non-legally binding, all rights reversed nonsense, right? And I said, you can say whatever you want about it. I mean, it amounts to the same thing. I think my statement is equivalent or better. But I actually thought we got persona non grata off that wiki because we were serious about it and we were selling our stuff. Whereas, I think I mentioned this to you privately, Kim, but when you asked about do we know any other artists and stuff doing this, and I said that we do have a lot of, we know people in like the quote unquote open source superhero community, but most of them are not at all remotely serious about it, and I think they actually resent that we've published anything, because all they do is make up characters all day and not do anything with them.
The strange thing about sites like that is that they'll take a character and they'll create a character and they'll use like and if this is how you create, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But they'll go on like a Hero Maker doll site and they'll switch around options and they'll create their character, and then they'll make maybe 6 paragraphs about this character. They'll talk about their very, very briefly their bio, and their powers, and the whole thing maybe 6 paragraphs at most, and then they'll post it and want other people to use it. But they don't put any dialogue. They don't put how the character talks. They don't put a full story. A lot of times, if they'll put out the hero themselves and say, you can use this hero, but you can't use the art because I don't have the rights to the doll maker art. You can't use. I wrote stories with this character, but you can't use anything from those stories. Those are my copyrighted stories. And then it's like, well, what am I using and why am I using this and why would I ever want to use it? And then we flesh out our stuff. We have entire books about our characters. We share how they talk. We share the nuances of their powers. We share their adventures, and all the characters related to them are Creative Commons attribution share alike.
Yeah, and this is why I completely understand what you were saying a few minutes ago, Kim, and your perspective of the ongoing communication. But for us using the share alike, that what Shell's describing is exactly why we wanted to use share alike. We didn't want to get into these BS arguments with people.
Well, and the other big thing is like, but I would never want to put my character in your universe because then they would have to be share alike, or I want to just use your characters and only your characters, and I don't want to contribute any of my own characters or anything like that. But whatever I write, I want to copyright. So no one ever uses our stuff.
Yeah. This apparently is a whole fascinating field of public domain superheroes that I don't know anything about, and that I have to delve into because this sounds like actually it does sound like too much drama for me, but it sounds fascinating. But I'm sort of reminded of one of the figures, or the prime figure of the open source movement is someone I admire greatly. That is Richard Stallman, who has basically created the free and open source movement and the open source ethics, um, and he has a bunch of arguments about why all software should be open source. And he's very specific in his arguments, and the problem with the arguments is that they're completely right. I've seen a lot of people try to argue against his fundamental open source thinking, and they all fail. But he doesn't budge on it. He lives a life where he has he only uses open source. He only everything is in connection with this main main philosophy, and the main philosophy is correct. I agree with it 100%. But every time he tries to argue with people who don't agree 100%, the argument stops because he's correct, and the other ones don't want to be incorrect. So they stand their ground, and so I really heartfelt admire what Stallman, how he's living his life, and I think that his arguments are at least on the basics of open source is the argument, and I use most of my software at home is open source, but I still think that whatever your philosophy is whatever your goal is, you have to keep an open mind and try to understand other people's arguments, because if you don't try to understand theirs, then they won't try to understand yours. And especially when we're talking about copyright issues, I'm not talking to Disney.
Right.
I would, but they probably have no interest in talking to me.
Right.
I'm not talking to copyright lawyers. I would, but they're not in my circle. I'm talking to artists and art lovers. So no matter how much I disagree with them and how much they disagree with me, we're still basically all about the same thing, which is that art is awesome. We want what's best for art. We want what's best for we want better art, good stuff. I like the good stuff, and in conversations with people of different views, I have to remind myself that we're on the same team. We're on team art. We want what's best for the things we love, and whether that be people who are very dogmatic about their open source public domain superheroes, or whether it be someone who thinks that pirates ruined the music industry. We're basically on the same team. We want to live in a world where people create good art.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is having Creative Commons and copyright run simultaneously, exist in the same world. You're gonna navigating it is a little difficult, and there's trade-offs to everything you do. There's trade-offs to work for hire and copywriting your work, and there's trade-offs to releasing it Creative Commons and what license you do. But
I'll go back to my metaphor of the bridge over troubled water. I would like to see a bridge in the future, but I'd rather be in the rowboat than just out in the troubled waters.
Right.
And yeah.
And we have to understand that as evangelists of this thing, as supporters of this thing, people have thought a lot about it and come to a conclusion, and that we are by no means are we in the majority on this. Even if the way people behave is actually more in line with what we're talking about, how they outwardly profess their beliefs, they don't question this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a very fair point, that we need to be open to communicating with them, even though we believe, and we have good reason for believing very strongly that we're right. And you talk about Stallman on software. I'm a software engineer. I work for a corporation that produces copyrighted software, and I will tell you, and it's no different at this company than any other company. If it were not for open source projects, we would not have anything to sell. Our entire thing is built on this essential network, this groundwork of open source projects. We use them extensively, and there's it just wouldn't work. We wouldn't be able to produce what we had, because we'd have to reinvent everything. And when it comes to that, but by the same token, they don't want to release even old software that they're letting expire. They won't release it into as open source. And I say, why not? Because they could. The truth is that these companies that are buying our software to use it, if you said, hey, it's open source, you can download it and use it for your business without paying for it, not one of them would not pay for it, because what they're paying for is you standing behind the product. What they're paying for in the software case is support, is people explaining them how to use it, and when they have a problem, right? They're not because probably they could torrent it somewhere if they really wanted it to, but they're not going to put their business on that.
And being able to have a say in what will be in updates.
Exactly, right. So there's all kinds of things when you think about, if as you say in your Patreon, it's free, but we're not necessarily giving it away, and even if you get it for free in terms of money, there's still good reasons to pay. You want to support artists. If you want to see more of this, we have to survive. So sorry, go ahead.
And just a tangent of this, basically because I'm I'm on social media. I've listed my go search for me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and on YouTube, which is owned by Google. And we there's a lot of fair criticism about the social media companies these days, because Facebook does a lot of things that are clearly very wrong. Google does a lot of things that are clearly very wrong. But at the same time, one of the things I'm a bit hopeful about is that these social media platforms could be controlled by people who didn't understand anything that we have been talking about today. But a company like Google is actually they're doing the whole copyright thing, and they're trademarking and everything, and they're doing a lot of nasty business practices here and there. But at the core, they are programmer based, and programmers understand the necessity of open source, which is why Google is doing a lot of open source development and open source projects on the side, because they know that this is really valuable. And you can say the same about most social media companies. At the core, they know that this is actually free software, free use. These things are actually important.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully their corporate structure will, over time, develop towards the freer and not towards the more closed off. And that might be one of the things that set in motion a larger societal reevaluation of the whole intellectual property philosophy.
I would like to be optimistic with you on that point, but as an engineer, I'm pessimistic about it, because the engineers, despite even with Google saying, we're an engineering company, we're all about the developers and testers and everything. The truth is that there is, as in anywhere else, the corporate overlords are the C-level management are not listening and not really caring what engineers have to say about that, or anything else, really. Unfortunately, I just, I would love to be optimistic about that, but just from my experience on a day-to-day basis with much less. I'm
not saying it's all rosy. I'm just saying that
Hope springs eternal.
Yeah. There's hope in hell. Yeah.
I was actually going to say we're at the 1 hour, close to 45-minute mark.
Ooh.
So this is obviously going to be 2 videos, but I was going to say, do we want to try to wrap it up a bit?
I think so. I think we had some great things to talk about, but we don't want. I don't want to keep Kim all night. We don't want to run out of steam either.
So I did want to ask you, Kim, is there a place to find or view your comic work online?
My comic book work, most of the major stuff I did is I've uploaded to archive.org.
Okay.
And I need to make a more manageable portal for it, but I haven't thus far. If you search...
I had just asked because you had mentioned your H.P. Lovecraft comic, and I personally might want to take a look at that.
Do take a look at that. You search for Kim Holm, Pickman's Model, and you find it on archive.org.
All right. We'll put a link to that down there, too.
I just found it, so put that up.
And we'll link to Kim Holm's art, too, on his... I can't even pronounce the title of your website. I'm sorry.
denungeherrholm.smugmug.com. Yes.
His stuff is really awesome. You should totally check it out. We had a big discussion earlier on about how high energy it is, and how it really captures that balance of well, I'm not going to go into the whole thing again, but you should totally check out Kim's art.
Thank you.
And we featured some of Kim's art in one of our role-playing game publications, which came out in the February issue of Bexton's Bazaar magazine, but we'll also be selling that separately very shortly on Drive-Thru RPG and some other RPG portals. So we'll link that as well.
And just as importantly, don't be afraid to educate yourself on copyright and Creative Commons and how it affects you as a creator. And any last words, or are we just going to say our goodbyes?
I think I set up all my words.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Kim.
It was a pleasure talking with you, and we almost got to the point. So well done.
And adieu to you, fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu to you, ladies of Spain.